Well, for more on the elections in Africa, we're joined by Michael Clyne, the Africa analyst and risk management consultant for global risk management firm Drum Cusack. Welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you.
Many elections across the continent in 2016, but was this a good year for democracy, especially considering we had the ongoing situation in the DRC and Gambia, where the strongmen Joseph Kabila and Yahya Jammeh are still clinging on to power there?
That's right. Well, in a continent with 55 countries, there's always something to talk about when it comes to elections, particularly at year's end. And it's a continent with a really diverse and deeply engaged electorate, which remains, when given the opportunity, the most powerful driver for change in the world. The problem is that they're often at odds with more autocratic rulers who are looking to stay in power and exasperate political tensions and propagate really the misnomer that elections are about instability and that every election in Africa is a winner-take-all, do-or-die bad one. Really, they should be about the competition and exchange of free ideas. Despite all this diversity, things usually fall along two trajectories. One, you can usually guess the outcome by saying the incumbent party or leader won because they've stifled competition and consolidated power. But on the other hand, you have some countries where incumbents have lost or stepped down from their elections, and aging leaders are stepping down with more marginal frequency. The Gambia is an interesting example at the end of the year because it really represents the intersection of these two trajectories. You had an increasingly ruthless, autocratic strongman ruler who initially stepped down after making the rarity of rarities in Africa, and that's the concessionary phone call to his opponent, until, of course, he took it back and said that he wouldn't be stepping down. So as we wrap up 2016 and look forward, Gambia really hangs in the balance of these two trajectories, and as we set the stage for what 2017 is going to look like, it's unclear what path it will choose, whether it will go down like more freer regional countries like Senegal and Ghana, or whether it will fall down the chasm of political conflict like Cote d'Ivoire did about 6 years ago.
Let's talk about Ghana, Michael, since you mentioned it. It's long been an example of democracy and economic stability in Africa with the gold, cocoa, and oil, but recently falling on hard times and has sought an IMF bailout. What's happened here?
Right, Ghana represents the other side in terms of a more stable middle-income country, but also the other side of that trajectory in that an incumbent president who has conceded to his challenger. It's a more positive note to end politically on, despite its economic uncertainty and slump. But it's not the only positive outcome of 2016. There were elections at the very beginning of the year in Central African Republic, which ushered in a more peaceful government and tampered down sectarian violence there. And some of the underreported elections were not presidential at all, in fact, but were constitutional referendums in Senegal, democratizing that political system, or local elections in South Africa.
Yeah, let's talk about South Africa. Jacob Zuma survives this impeachment. He says he's done nothing wrong. What's the best hope there for the economy and this chaotic government?
Right, South Africa still sees itself as the leader of the region, and despite economic slump and political chaos, if you will, its civil society and institutions have still been able to stand up to an increasingly autocratic or chaotic government. And that really, we saw that in August when local elections saw the ANC, African National Congress, lose most of the major cities in South Africa to a series of opposition coalitions, which are now positioning themselves to show up the ANC in general elections down the line, which could see Africa's most iconic liberation movement be voted out of power.
But people there are clearly still unhappy with him, Michael.
Yes, and that's why we're looking closely to 2019 when they'll be holding their next general election, and why that despite its political and economic uncertainty, South Africa still has some of the strongest civil society that's able to stand up to increasingly autocratic or incompetent governments, and why this political trend for 2016 is really, in my opinion, a net positive putting it on that trajectory towards a more free society despite economic and market uncertainty.
People had really great hope for Muhammadu Buhari in Nigeria, really cracking down on corruption there, but people are still really in poverty and things are not good. What is it going to take to move it around?
Nigeria's had to weather a number of crises. First, be it economically, it's really on the losing end of the commodity slump in the past several years, particularly in oil, which accounts for the lion's share of the Nigerian economy and currency reserves. Moreover, it's battling several violent crises, most famously in the north, where Boko Haram is on a sturdy back foot. In the central region, there's actually increasing sectarian violence. And in the southern oil-producing region, there's a new militancy that's resurfaced in the form of the Niger Delta Avengers, which have slashed oil production and really cut the Nigerian government's hopes of paying off or paying for solutions to its economic, military, and violent crises. And that leaves it with little hope, maybe, except to negotiate a solution, a development-based, longer-term solution with the likes of the Niger Delta Avengers, which may actually be the best hope for moving forward.
Well, Michael Clyne from Drum Cusack, thank you so much for your time joining us from New York.